Welcome to Church History Stories, where I explore the fascinating world of church history and the documents that shaped our understanding of early Christianity. Today we're examining a text that's generated considerable interest, and frankly, quite a bit of misunderstanding: the Gospel of Mary. Now, let me be upfront about what we're dealing with here. This is a pseudepigraphical work, meaning it falsely claims to be written by someone it wasn't actually written by. But that doesn't make it uninteresting from a historical perspective. What it reveals about second-century Christianity and the challenges facing the early church is genuinely fascinating. The Gospel of Mary was discovered in 1896 as part of what scholars call the Berlin Codex, found in Cairo, Egypt. Unlike some dramatic narratives you might have heard, this wasn't a text that church authorities were desperately trying to suppress. It simply wasn't well known or widely circulated. The manuscript wasn't published until 1955, primarily because scholars needed time to properly translate and study these ancient documents. Not because anyone was hiding anything. The text itself is written in both Greek and Coptic, with the surviving manuscript dating to somewhere between the 3rd and 5th centuries after Christ. However, the original composition likely occurred in the 2nd century, which immediately tells us something important. This is not an apostolic work. It's a later document that borrows apostolic names for authority, a common practice in ancient pseudepigraphical literature. Here's what makes this discovery particularly intriguing. We don't have the complete text. 10 pages are missing from the only known copy, including the first 6 pages. This fragmentary nature makes it difficult to understand the complete message, but what remains is significant enough to have sparked decades of scholarly debate and popular fascination. The text presents Mary, traditionally understood to be Mary Magdalene, as a recipient of special revelations from Jesus. In the surviving portions, we see Jesus explaining spiritual truths to his disciples, followed by Mary sharing additional teachings she received from the risen Christ. The other disciples, particularly Peter and Andrew, express skepticism about Mary's claims to special knowledge. This brings us to a crucial question: who exactly is the Mary in this gospel? While tradition identifies her as Mary Magdalene, the text itself never explicitly states this. Given that 6 women named Mary appear in the New Testament, some scholars have proposed alternatives. Stephen Shoemaker and F. Stanley Jones have suggested it might be Mary, the mother of Jesus. Barbara Silvertson argues it could be a sister of Jesus mentioned in other non-canonical texts. However, most scholars favor the Mary Magdalene identification, primarily because of her established role in other early Christian writings and her known position among Jesus' followers. The canonical Gospels present her as a woman from whom Jesus cast out 7 demons, who financially supported his ministry, and who was present at the crucifixion and was first to witness the empty tomb. The Gospel of Mary reflects what scholars call Gnostic influence, though the extent of this influence is debated. Gnosticism emphasized secret knowledge, or gnosis, as the path to salvation. The text portrays Mary as possessing unique spiritual insight that the male disciples lack. This theme of tension between different apostolic traditions was common in 2nd century Christianity. Here's what the surviving text reveals. After the resurrection, the disciples are afraid and uncertain about their mission. Mary encourages them, sharing additional teachings she received from Jesus in a vision. These teachings focus on the soul's journey and liberation from material existence. When Mary finishes, Andrew and Peter object. Peter specifically questions whether Jesus would really reveal such important teachings to a woman, suggesting her testimony cannot be trusted because of her gender. Levi, presumably the tax collector turned disciple, defends Mary, arguing that if the Saviour considered her worthy, who are they to reject her? The text ends with the disciples going out to preach, but the controversy over Mary's authority remains unresolved. This tension reflects real conflicts in the early church. The canonical Gospels themselves show tensions between different apostolic traditions. In the Gospel of John, Peter and the beloved disciple race to the tomb. In Acts, Paul confronts Peter over issues of Gentile inclusion. The Gospel of Mary simply extends this pattern of apostolic disagreement into the 2nd century. From a historical perspective, this text provides valuable insight into the theological developments and conflicts of 2nd century Christianity. It shows us how some communities were grappling with questions that the apostolic writings had already settled, questions of authority, revelation, and the nature of spiritual knowledge. The Church Fathers who were aware of this gospel and yes, they knew about it, rejected it not out of some conspiracy or fear, but because they recognized what we can still see today. It was a later composition that contradicted established apostolic teaching. Epiphanius of Salamis mentioned it in the 4th century, clearly identifying it as heretical. This wasn't suppression. This was theological discernment based on clear criteria: apostolic authorship, early date, widespread acceptance among churches, and consistency with established Christian doctrine. Now, I should address the elephant in the room. Modern conspiracy theories, particularly those popularized by works like the Da Vinci Code, have made wild claims about this text. They suggest it provides evidence of a romantic relationship between Jesus and Mary Magdalene, or that it proves the early church suppressed women's leadership to maintain patriarchal control. These claims simply don't hold up to careful examination of the actual text. The Gospel of Mary nowhere states that Jesus and Mary were romantically involved. It nowhere claims Jesus appointed Mary to lead the church, and the idea that this represents some kind of cover-up falls apart when you realize that early church leaders openly discussed and critiqued this text. They weren't hiding it. They were explaining why it didn't meet the standards for authentic apostolic witness. What the text does suggest is that some 2nd century Christian communities valued Mary Magdalene's spiritual insight and saw her as a legitimate recipient of divine revelation. This perspective competed with other emerging traditions that emphasized male apostolic authority. What this text does demonstrate is the enduring appeal of claiming apostolic authority for later theological innovations. The practice of pseudepigraphy, writing under someone else's name, was common in the ancient world. But early Christians developed increasingly sophisticated methods for identifying authentic apostolic works versus later imitations. The Gospel of Mary serves as an excellent case study in why the canonical process mattered so much. When you have multiple texts claiming apostolic authority, you need reliable criteria for distinguishing authentic witness from later speculation. The early church's commitment to apostolic authorship, early dating, widespread church acceptance, and doctrinal consistency helped preserve the authentic apostolic witness we find in our New Testament. As we study church history, documents like the Gospel of Mary remind us that theological discernment has always been necessary. The early church faced challenges from various directions, not just external persecution, but internal movements that claimed Christian authority, while teaching doctrines that contradicted apostolic tradition. This text remains valuable for historians and students of early Christianity, not because it informs our doctrine. It clearly cannot, given its late date and pseudepigraphical nature, but because it helps us understand the theological landscape of 2nd century Christianity and the wisdom of our spiritual predecessors in maintaining doctrinal fidelity. Thanks for joining me for this exploration into early Christian literature. If you're interested in more church history content, please subscribe, and let me know in the comments what other historical topics you'd like to see covered. Remember, understanding our history helps us better appreciate the foundation we've inherited and the challenges we continue to face today. Cheers.